Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some sandwich rolls that are out in the marketplace. Here we have our Brea Bakery Ciabatta Roll, which you can see is actually butterfly hinged. This is a multi-grain 3x6, I think, or a rectangle. This is what was described as a ciabatta roll on the package, and this was called a rustic focaccia roll, where I can see there's herbs in the dough. As you can see, a square format or a rectangular format, you're going to see a lot of out in the marketplace. But when we designed the Ciabatta roll, and some of the rolls after that, like our panini focaccia or our ciabatta roll, we took into account that bread is probably going to be the biggest part of the sandwich build. So we wanted it as low profile as possible, or as less weight as we can get it, while still butterfly hinging it. And we think that butterfly hinging is really great for the operators. And you can see we haven't seen other hinged items, at least in this assortment, but I think it's a very good selling point. Another thing about this is that when you're using this, especially if you're using it in a grill or any sort of reheating, you don't necessarily need to rebake it. You can use it from thaw and then go directly to grilling, panining it, or turbo chefing, or however it's used. These are a little harder to do because they're so big. It's probably required you need to thaw these out before you heat them through, or else they'll get really hard. But I'll show you the interior. It's multi-grain, so it's going to be dense, but that's a lot of bread for a sandwich. And this ciabatta roll is more around the size that I would consider. It's kind of probably a 3-ounce or a 3x3, which we have as well, just not here today. But this is probably going to be pretty standard interior structure. That's pretty open, surprisingly. Very focused in the center. As you can probably see from the outside with it's bulging. And then this focaccia roll has herbs inside, so another good option. Not a fit for all sandwiches, but could be used for various sandwiches. So the difference between this sort of profile and this higher profile here is that you're going to see a lot more of the interior than you are going to see of the bread. So with this, your sandwich build is going to sit really, really high, depending on what you got on the interior. So we want to make sure that the bread is in the forefront, but also plays a supporting role to the sandwiches, because it is a carrier. And a little bit tighter structure, which is what we're kind of going for, holds up better to a lot of high moisture foods. And this interior structure sometimes doesn't hold up as well because of the thin membranes and the really open holes, as you can see here. A lot of the high moisture condiments and ingredients kind of sit in those holes, which makes somewhat sandwich making difficult. This seems to be sort of in between, which would totally be acceptable. And this, you can see, it's a multi-grain, like I said, it's going to be denser, so the expectation is going to be it's going to be a heartier eat. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the food service dinner rolls that we've seen out in the marketplace. I want to start first with our assorted roll pack, which you can see is 4 varieties. We have our wheat roll, our French roll, French seeded, and our rustic roll. These 3, as you can see, the sort of the shape, are made by pretty much making a baguette and cutting them into equal sized pieces. And that's why we have that sort of shape as opposed to what you see everywhere else, which is square. So we do also cut this via guillotine, which is how all of these are made as well, but we just do this style this way. This one is a multi-grain roll from a competitor. Looks good. I want to just call out just across the board, including ourselves, that there is variability here, and that's going to happen. We like this sort of process here. As you can see, it's a little bit more consistent, but we do still see variability. So when you're dealing with these smaller pieces of bread, variability just sort of increases because it's very hard to control on these lines unless you're doing a round roll process, which is divided a little bit more evenly. But then we have another competitor's assorted roll collection. So this is a wheat, a seeded ciabatta or a seeded French, and a ciabatta roll. So as you see, our competitors have 3 in their assorted roll pack, and we have 4 in our assorted roll pack. If that's an advantage, disadvantage, I don't know. What I do see here is that, especially in food service, and I've heard this many times over the years, is that if you notice, these right here look a lot smaller in weight than everything else. And I think knowing this manufacturer, it's probably to save on cost and be a little bit more competitive, because I know that their throughput is very high. So definitely think that they might have an advantage on price point over us just strictly based on size. But I don't know, I'm speculating. These are getting a little bit small, but I think the uses of these are obviously dinner roll. I've used these for sliders, so I'll cut these in half, build sandwiches on them, as well as these and these. And you can do crostinis with these. You can slice them lengthwise for a different style of crostini. So there's a variety of uses for these, but primarily I think for sliders and for table red. So now I'm going to cut these so we can see the interior structure. This is wheat, so wheat tends to be a little bit more dense because of the whole wheat flour, or the percentage of whole wheat flour in the dough. You see we get a little bit better interior structure. Same thing we're trying to get with some of the larger loaves, a little open hole structure, a good crust. I mean, this recipe or this dough is very similar to our French baguette dough, so we're looking for some of the same attributes. Same thing with the seeded. It's just seeded with our sesame, amaranth, and poppy. Again, we're still trying to get a little open hole structure. This one is a little bit more hydrated. It's more in line than with our ciabatta formulation. That one looks a little dense for my liking. Again, these are all going to be probably a lot more open because of the way they're processed. Cut, they're just cut into squares without any molding or anything. As you can see, it is definitely more open. I know these guys do a good job, so. That one's really open. And there's a French. So I can see just by handling these and cutting these are really, really light in weight. So, there could be an advantage on cost with those. Careful what you're comparing because not everything is like to like, Look at price point, look at overall visuals. Hopefully I've offered some clues where you can kind of see certain processing attributes for these various breads, but they're not all comparable.